The heat in Silver Creek didn't just oppress, it suffocated. It was a physical weight, pressing down on the dusty plaza where the earth was packed as hard as iron and twice as unforgiving. It was mid-August, the kind of afternoon that turned patience into powder kegs. Cowboys leaned against the rough-hewn hitching posts, their spurs chiming like distant funeral bells whenever they shifted, while merchants stood in the shaded recesses of their storefronts, watching the world with eyes bleached pale by greed and the relentless sun. Women in calico hurried from shadow to shadow, their parasols tilted like shields against the glare and the predatory stares of idle men. Into this cauldron walked Elara Vance. To the desperate, she was the healer of the high Sierras. To the fearful and the ignorant, she was the witch woman. She stood tall, her spine a rod of iron, her dark skin gleaming with a sheen of perspiration that looked more like oil on bronze. Her dress was homespun, the color of dried sage, practical and devoid of the frills that define the women of the town. The leather satchel across her shoulder was heavy, bulging with the secrets of the mountain, roots, tinctures, and dried leaves that held more power than any prayer book in Silver Creek. She stopped in the dead center of the plaza. The silence that rippled outward from her was instantaneous. She ignored the whispers that trailed her like dust devils. Her eyes, dark and discerning, scanned the gathered men until they locked onto a solitary figure lounging on the steps of the Whispering Pine Saloon. He was new. That much was obvious. His clothes were coated in the gray dust of the long trail, and he sat with the deceptive relaxation of a predator conserving energy. His hand rested casually near the butt of a holstered Colt Navy revolver. Unlike the townsfolk, he hadn't joined in the sneering. He was simply watching, his gray eyes, the color of a storm front over the Rockies, tracking her every move. Elara squared her shoulders and cut a straight line toward him. The plaza held its collective breath. She stopped 3 feet from him, close enough to smell the scent of pine smoke, leather, and gun oil that clung to him. He tilted his head back, the brim of his hat revealing a face etched by wind and hard decisions. "You," Elara said. Her voice wasn't loud, yet it carried across the square with the clarity of a cracking whip. "Tonight, you are coming to my bed." The shock in the air was palpable, a fragile glass shattering into 1,000 shards of raucous laughter and catcalls. Men slapped their thighs, wiping tears of mirth from weather-beaten cheeks. A piercing whistle cut the air. Someone shouted a crude remark about a woman knowing her station. But the stranger didn't laugh. His storm-gray eyes narrowed, studying her with an intensity that stripped away the noise of the crowd. He saw what the jeering fools missed. The tremor in her clenched hands, hidden in the folds of her dress. The desperate calculation in the set of her jaw. The terrifying courage of a woman with her back against a precipice. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the sudden lull. "That is a mighty bold proposition for a Sunday afternoon." "I am not proposing anything improper," Elara replied, lifting her chin, refusing to be cowed by the audience. "I require a husband, legal, binding, and proper. You look like a man who might listen to logic before he listens to the hyenas laughing behind you." The laughter faltered, then died, choked off by the sudden shift in tone. This wasn't a scandal, this was business. And in Silver Creek, business involving land and law was a religion. The stranger unfolded himself from the steps. He was tall, towering over her by a good 4 inches, his broad shoulders blocking out the glare of the sun. He touched the brim of his hat. "Name is Caleb Thorne. Most folks just call me Thorne." "And you are?" "Elara Vance. My father was Elijah Vance." She watched the flicker of recognition in his eyes. Everyone knew the name. Elijah Vance, the freedman who had come west with nothing but a brilliant mind and a sack of books, eventually securing 1,200 acres of the richest silver land in the territory. The man who had died 3 months ago under circumstances that were still whispered about in dark corners. "I heard about your father," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a confidential volume. "Also heard you might be having some trouble with his estate." Elara's laugh was short and bitter, like the snap of a dry twig. "Trouble is a polite word for theft." She pulled a folded document from her satchel, the territorial seal catching the light. "The court says I have 30 days to marry or forfeit everything my father built. 23 days have already vanished." And the suitors? Thorne asked, his gaze flicking to the crowd. Surely a woman with 1,200 acres has men lining up. Oh, they lined up, Elara said. 3 of them. One suddenly decided the climate in California was better suited for his health. Another remembered a sick aunt in Missouri. The third... She paused, her lips thinning. The third was honest enough to admit that someone made it very worth his while to vanish. Thorne's eyes narrowed. Someone like Mayor Sterling. Elara didn't nod, but the silence between them screamed the truth. Mayor Sterling owned the bank, the freight line, and the souls of half the men in town. He had been circling Elijah's land like a vulture for years, waiting for the old man to falter. "Why me?" Thorne asked quietly. "You don't know a thing about me, lady. I could be a thief, a killer, or worse. I know you've been in town 3 days. I know Sterling offered you a job enforcing his peace for the cattle drives, and I know you haven't taken his coin yet. That means you're either honest or you're too expensive for him. Either way, you aren't in his pocket." Elara took a step closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "And I know you're the kind of man who sits and watches while others make fools of themselves. My father taught me to read the land, Mr. Thorne, but he also taught me to read men. You are my best chance." Thorne studied her, really looked at her, for a long stretch silence. The crowd pressed in, eager for the rejection, eager to see the proud Vance woman humbled. "What is the offer?" "Partnership," Elara said simply. "Marriage in name, legal and binding. I keep my land, my father's legacy. You get 20% of the silver profits and a place to lay your head that isn't a bedroll under the stars. After 1 year, if you want to drift on, we arrange a quiet annulment or divorce. No harm done." "And if I say no?" Elara's shoulders slumped for a fraction of a second before she forced them rigid again. "Then, in 7 days, Sterling takes everything. The land, the silver, the house my mother birthed me in. And I will spend the rest of my life knowing I could have stopped it if I had been brave enough to ask a stranger for help." Thorne took off his hat, running a hand through sweat-dampened dark hair. The crowd held its breath. This was better than the traveling circus. A desperate woman, a dangerous drifter, and stakes worth killing for. "When?" he asked finally. Hope, sharp and painful, flared in Elara's chest. "Tomorrow morning. Judge Cornelius Stone rides the circuit through here on Tuesday. We need to be wed before he arrives." "We can do better than tomorrow," Thorne interrupted, replacing his hat. "Reverend Jacobs is in his parsonage right now. If we are doing this, Mrs. Vance, we are doing it before Sterling has time to formulate a countermove." Elara blinked, stunned by the sudden shift from negotiation to action. "You mean now?" "I mean exactly what I said, but first, you and I need to talk, privately." He offered his arm, a gesture of old-world courtliness that drew gasps from the watching women. "Shall we?" Elara hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing her hand on his forearm. It was hard as oak. Together, they walked through the parting crowd, leaving behind a plaza buzzing with the electricity of scandal. As they passed the general store, Elara caught the movement of heavy velvet curtains in the mayor's office window. Sterling was watching. "He isn't going to let this happen easily," Thorne murmured, sensing her tension. "I know," Elara replied. "That is why I chose a man wearing a gun." They made their way to the small, whitewashed church at the edge of town. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of beeswax and old hymnals. Thorne guided her to a back pew and sat, gesturing for her to join him. "Now," he said, "tell me the real story. All of it, not the town square version." Elara sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "My father was born into chains in Virginia. He taught himself to read by lamplight, fought for the Union, and came west to breathe free air. He understood laws and contracts better than the white lawyers in Denver. That's how he got the land. The previous owner died owing taxes, and Papa found the legal notice before anyone else. He paid the fees and filed the claim." "A smart man," Thorne mused. "Dangerous thing to be in a town like this." "Too smart," Elara whispered. "He started getting sick last winter. It began with tremors in his hands, then confusion. He started seeing things. Dr. Finnegan, Sterling's cousin, said it was mountain fever and prescribed tonics. Papa only got worse. By the end, he didn't even know me." Thorne's face darkened. That doesn't sound like fever. No, it doesn't. Elara reached into her satchel and produced a small glass vial wrapped in a cloth. I found this hidden in the back of Papa's medicine chest after the funeral. I sent a sample to a chemist in San Francisco. It's mercury. Given in small doses over time, it drives a man mad before it kills him. Thorne took the vial, holding it up to the shaft of light filtering through the stained glass. Proof of murder. Proof enough for me, Elara said fiercely, but not enough for a court that takes a white doctor's word over a black woman's. But if I keep the land, I keep the evidence. I keep fighting. There are others Sterling has crushed. If we stand, they might stand with us. Thorne handed the vial back. You are trusting a stranger with a lot of dangerous secrets, Elara. My father used to say, desperation clarifies the mind. She met his gaze. Besides, I lied earlier. I know more about you. You're Caleb Thorne, the man who held off the Red River Gang in Abilene. You're the one who negotiated the peace between the sheep herders and the cattle barons in Wyoming without firing a shot. You solve problems, Mr. Thorne. I am offering you the chance to solve mine. Thorne leaned back, the wood creaking. Those stories get taller every time they're told. I'm just a man who prefers words to bullets when I can help it. Then talk to me. Why accept? It's a risk. For the first time, a shadow of personal pain crossed Thorne's face. My own father lost his farm to a railroad lawyer and a crooked sheriff. I was a boy, too young to do anything but watch him break. Maybe I'm just tired of watching. He stood up, extending a hand. Let's find Reverend Jacobs. We best get this done before Sterling figures out how to stop the clock. The ceremony was hasty, performed by a bewildered Reverend Jacobs with Mrs. Liu, the Chinese laundress, and Old Man Silas, a crippled prospector, serving as witnesses. As they spoke the vows, the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting Silver Creek in shades of blood and bruised purple. I do, Thorne said, his voice steady as a rock slide. I do, Elara echoed, surprising herself with the strength of her own voice. When they emerged from the church, night had fully fallen, but the darkness wasn't empty. Standing at the bottom of the steps was Jake Finnegan, the doctor's brother and Sterling's foreman, flanked by 4 men wearing long dusters. Well, Finnegan drawled, his hand resting on his hip. Heard there was a wedding. Funny, we didn't get an invite. Thorne moved instantly, placing himself between Elara and the men. Private affair, family only. Family? Finnegan spat. A drifter, a witch, a washerwoman, and a cripple. That's a hell of a family. Old Man Silas gripped his walking stick, his knuckles white. Better than a pack of rabid dogs, Finnegan. Finnegan's hand twitched toward his gun. I wouldn't, Thorne said. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it terrifying. You pull that iron in front of a house of God, Finnegan, and you better be ready to meet him tonight. Finnegan hesitated. He looked at Thorne's stance, the relaxed shoulders, the hand hovering inches from the Colt. He did the math, and he didn't like the sum. Just came to deliver a message from Mayor Sterling, Finnegan sneered, pulling an envelope from his coat and tossing it into the dirt. He's calling in your daddy's debts, Martha. Seems Elijah borrowed heavily against the silver. Payment due in full by Friday. Elara started forward, but Thorne's arm barred her path. We will review the claims, Thorne said. Now you've delivered your mail. Get gone. We're going, Finnegan laughed, backing away. Enjoy the honeymoon. Hope she's worth dying for, Thorne. As the riders thundered off, Elara snatched up the envelope, tearing it open by the light of the church lantern. Lies, she hissed. Papa never borrowed a cent from Sterling. These are forgeries. Can you prove it? Thorne asked. Papa kept ledgers. Everything is recorded. It's in the strongbox at the cabin. Then that is where we go, Thorne said. Tonight. The ride up the mountain was silent, the moon casting long shadows through the ponderosa pines. Elara's cabin was a fortress of solitude, built from logs silvered by age, nestled against a sheer rock face. You take the loft, Elara said as they entered, the awkwardness of their arrangement suddenly filling the room. I'll take the bedroom. Thorne nodded, checking the window shutters. I'll sleep in the main room near the door, in case our friends decide to return. That night, Elara lay awake, listening to the steady breathing of the stranger, her husband, in the next room. She had saved her land for now, but the war had just begun. The first battle came 3 days later, not with guns, but with fire. Thorne woke to the smell of smoke, acrid and thick. He was out of his bedroll and through the door in seconds, his gun drawn. The supply shed, where Elara kept years of harvested medicines, was ablaze. "Fire!" he roared. Elara burst from her room, seeing the orange glow reflecting off the trees. "The herbs!" she screamed, running toward the well. They fought the fire for an hour, passing buckets until their arms screamed and their lungs burned. At dawn, the shed was a smoldering ruin. 3 months of willow bark, feverfew, and dried echinacea were gone. "Arson," Thorne said, kneeling by the charred remains. "Smell the coal oil?" Elara stood amidst the ashes, soot streaking her face. Tears of rage tracked through the grime. "They want to break me. They want to show the town I can't protect what is mine." "Then we show them otherwise." Thorne stood up, his face hard. "Get dressed, Mrs. Vance Thorne. We are going to town." They rode into Silver Creek like avenging angels. They didn't go to the sheriff, who was on Sterling's payroll. They went to the diner where Finnegan and his crew were eating breakfast. Thorne kicked the door open. The conversation inside died instantly. He walked to Finnegan's table, Elara a step behind him, a rifle in her hands. "Morning, Thorne," Finnegan smirked, a piece of bacon halfway to his mouth. "Hear you had some bad luck up on the mountain." Thorne didn't speak. He moved with a blur of speed, kicking the table over. Plates, coffee, and food went flying. Before Finnegan could scramble up, Thorne had him pinned against the wall, the barrel of his Colt pressed under the foreman's chin. "You got proof?" Finnegan gagged. "I don't need a judge for this," Thorne whispered. "You burned my wife's property. That makes it personal." "You kill me. Sterling hangs you," Finnegan wheezed. "Maybe," Thorne said, "but you won't be around to see it. Now, you are going to reach into your pocket and put $50 on the floor for the damages." "50? You're crazy." Thorne cocked the hammer. The click was the loudest sound in the world. 60. Trembling, Finnegan reached into his coat and threw a wad of bills onto the sawdust floor. "Pleasure doing business," Thorne said, releasing him. He stepped back, keeping the room covered. "Next time you come to my mountain, Finnegan, bring a coffin." They left the diner in silence, the money in Elara's pocket. Outside, she let out a breath she had been holding for an hour. "That was reckless." "That was necessary," Thorne corrected. "Bullies only understand one language." But the real turning point didn't come from violence. It came from a fever. 2 days before Judge Stone was due to arrive, a scream tore through the main street. A woman, Sarah Miller, was kneeling in the dust, clutching her 8-year-old son, Toby. The boy was convulsing, his skin burning hot. "Help him!" Sarah screamed. "Dr. Finnegan turned us away, said he couldn't pay." Elara didn't think. She didn't calculate. She ran. She knelt beside the boy, her hands immediately checking his pulse, his eyes. "Mountain fever," she diagnosed instantly. "It's in his lungs." "Get away from him!" Mayor Sterling's voice boomed. He had appeared from his office, flanked by Dr. Finnegan. "You are practicing medicine without a license, woman. That is a crime." "The boy is dying," Elara shouted back, not looking up. "Your cousin's tonics are useless sugar water. He needs sulfur and willow bark, now." "Arrest her," Sterling ordered the sheriff. The sheriff stepped forward, hand on his gun, but he stopped when a shadow fell over him. Thorne stood there, his hand resting on his Colt. "Sheriff," Thorne said pleasantly, "you are about to arrest a woman for trying to save a child. How do you think that plays out in the history books?" "Step aside, Thorne," the sheriff warned. "No," Thorne said. The single word was a wall. "Let her work." The crowd began to murmur. They had all lost children to Dr. Finnegan's incompetence. "Let her try," Mrs. Lou shouted from the back. "Let her try." Old man Silas banged his stick. The chant grew. Sterling looked around, seeing his control slipping. He sneered. "Fine. If the boy dies, it's murder, and you will hang for it." Elara ignored him. "Caleb, I need the bag from the saddle." For 3 hours, right there in the dusty street, Elara worked. She mixed a poultice of foul-smelling yellow paste and applied it to the boy's chest. She forced a bitter tea between his lips. She bathed his forehead with cool water brought by the townswomen. The sun beat down. The boy's breathing was a ragged rattle. Dr. Finnegan stood by, arms crossed, waiting for death. Then Toby coughed, a deep, wet cough that cleared his lungs. His eyes fluttered open. The heat began to fade from his skin. "Mama," he whispered. The crowd erupted. Women wept. Men clapped Thorne on the shoulder. Sarah Miller threw her arms around Elara, sobbing her thanks. Elara stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at Sterling. "He will live. No thanks to you." Sterling's face was purple with rage. "This isn't over. Judge Stone arrives tomorrow. We will see what the law says about witches and charlatans." That night, the cabin was full. It wasn't just Elara and Thorne anymore. Thomas, the grocer who had been squeezed by Sterling's freight rates, was there. Mrs. Lou brought tea. The Miller family brought food. They were building an army, not of guns, but of witnesses. "We have the ledger," Thomas said, his hands shaking as he produced a book. "I kept records. Every bribe Sterling paid, every shipment he stole. It's all here." "And we have the testimony regarding the poison," Thorne added. "I found the chemist in Denver. He sent a telegram. He's willing to talk if he gets immunity." "We have a case," Elara said, looking around the room. "But Sterling has the judge." "Maybe not," Thorne said. "I did some digging on Judge Stone. He's a hard man, but he's fair. And he hates claim jumpers." The trial of the century, as the local paper called it, began at 9 in the morning. The town hall was packed to the rafters. Sterling presented his case with the arrogance of a man who owned the verdict. He accused Elara of fraud, of witchcraft, of endangering the public health. He produced the forged loan documents, claiming Elijah Vance died in debt. "And this marriage," Sterling sneered, pointing at Thorne, "a sham. A prostitute's bargain to bypass the law." Judge Stone peered over his spectacles. "Defense?" Elara stood up. She didn't need a lawyer. She had the truth. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "my father didn't die in debt. He died because he was poisoned with mercury by Dr. Finnegan on orders from Mayor Sterling." Gasps filled the room. "Objection!" Sterling roared. "Slander. I have the vial," Elara said, placing it on the judge's bench. "And I have the affidavit from the chemist in Denver who sold it to Dr. Finnegan." She laid the paper down. Stone picked it up, reading it in silence. His face grew stony. "And the loans?" Stone asked. "Forged," Thomas the grocer spoke up from the back. "I witnessed the mayor practicing Elijah's signature in the back of my store. I have the practice sheets he discarded." He walked forward and placed the crumpled papers on the bench. Sterling was sweating now. "These people are liars, trash." "And the medical practice?" Stone asked, looking at Elara. "You admit to treating patients without a license?" "I admit to saving a boy your licensed doctor left to die," Elara retorted. "If that is a crime, lock me up. But I will not apologize for knowing how to heal." "Your Honor," Thorne stood up, "regarding the marriage, it may have started as a contract. But I ask you, does a man stand in front of a mob, fight a fire, and face down a corrupt mayor for a business deal? My wife is the most honorable person in this valley, and I intend to stay married to her for as long as she'll have me." Elara looked at him, tears pricking her eyes. It was the first time he had said it publicly. "My wife." Judge Stone banged his gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. "I have seen enough," Stone rumbled. "Sheriff, arrest Mayor Sterling and Dr. Finnegan for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. I will be wiring the U.S. Marshal to conduct a full investigation into the death of Elijah Vance." Pandemonium broke out. Sterling was dragged away, screaming threats. The townspeople cheered, a roar that shook the dust from the rafters. In the chaos, Elara found Thorne. They stood amidst the swirling crowd, an island of calm. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," Thorne corrected, taking her hand. "I just held the door open." 6 months later, Silver Creek was a different town. The freight rates were fair. A real doctor, a young woman from the East who wanted to learn herbal medicine, had moved into the clinic, taking Elara on as a partner. The silver mine was producing with profits shared among the workers. On the porch of the cabin, watching the sunset over the valley, Elara leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder. The arrangement had long since been abandoned. His things were in the bedroom. Her heart was in his hands. "You know," Caleb said, watching the first stars appear, "you never did fulfill your end of the contract." "Oh?" Elara raised an eyebrow. "Which part?" "The part about the annulment after a year." "Elara, laughed, the sound rich and free. "I suppose I am in breach of contract, then, because I am not going anywhere." "Good," Caleb said, pulling her close, "because I'm just getting settled." They stood together, the mountain medicine woman and the drifter who had found a home, watching the lights of a free town twinkle below them like a reflection of the stars above. They had fought the law, the greedy, and the hate, and they had won. But their greatest victory wasn't the silver or the land. It was the simple, quiet truth that in the Wild West, sometimes the biggest gamble is trusting someone else with your life and winning a future you never dared to dream of. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and romance in the Old West, please consider subscribing to the channel. We have new stories every week, featuring the rugged heroes and fierce women who tame the frontier. Tell us in the comments, do you think Elara should have forgiven the townspeople who turned on her so quickly? Or was she right to move forward for the sake of the future? Don't forget to hit that like button and share this story with a friend who loves a happy ending. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your eyes on the horizon.